Welcome to a very special edition of One on One, except there are three of us. Steve Adubato, my colleague Mary Gamba, and also joined by our leader in public broadcasting, Neal Shapiro, President and CEO of the WNET Group. Neal, how we doing?
We're doing well. How about you, Steve?
We're doing great. We're taping this right before the 4th of July. Neal, you and I have talked about leadership, innovation, offline, online for a long time, and not just talked about it, you've lived it. What would you say 2.5 years plus into COVID, the most significant leadership lesson you have learned has been?
I think it's to be nimble. I think a lot of the things I was sure about that I thought I knew for sure have turned out not to be true. And I think it's about thinking about what's important both to your product and your people and being flexible. You know, if COVID has taught us nothing else, it's that things change and that we have to be, I think, flexible to meet those challenges.
Mary, before you jump in, I want to follow up on this with Neal. Neal, some of our guests on Lessons in Leadership have actually said that COVID has created, with all the horrific, 1 million people losing their lives plus in our nation, so many people suffering, it's created opportunities. Do you see it that way as well?
Oh, absolutely. Before COVID, we did an employee satisfaction survey, and our employees said they didn't like having little work carols in offices. They wanted more space, like Central Perk on Friends. They wanted couches and chairs, and they wanted people to take their computers wherever they went. And I said to the architects, how can I do this? And they said, well, you're gonna have 40% of your workforce stay home. And I said, how am I ever gonna have 40% of my workforce stay home? Well, now I have 100% of my workforce that can stay home. But I think it's an example to realize, I think we were worried as managers, how do we keep track of people? How do we know who's productive? And we just measured really productivity too often by attendance. Anybody who came here and just pounded away at their computer, that was considered working. I think we realized that's not the way to measure success anymore. And that I've always felt like happy employees are better employees. And I think there's now a better way to achieve a work-life balance than we had before.
It's well said. Mary and I often talk about the difference between activity. You're there, I know you're in the office, you're having a meeting versus impact. We try to focus more on impact. Pick it up from there, Mary.
Yeah, definitely, Neal. So no money, no mission. We are a nonprofit at 13 WNET. You're constantly trying to raise those necessary dollars to do the important work that we do, especially during the pandemic. What were some of the keys and lessons you learned in terms of building those relationships and still bringing in those important dollars when everybody was spread so thin?
Actually, I think what I learned is that you should never underestimate both the value of your mission, because COVID made ours even more clear. In so many ways, public media stepped up, whether it was just there to provide important news and information, and especially that got lost as some media turned to other things, whether it's providing incredible diversions to reminding people that though Broadway was closed, we still had Broadway plays. And when it was stepping into education, when schools closed down, we worked with teachers, and it was like springing up 80 classrooms or 80,000 classrooms. I heard from so many people that said public media filled a place in our lives that we hadn't really thought about. And the other thing is, while you're doing it and after, to remind people about that. Actually, you shouldn't be shy about asking for support, even in times like COVID, because I think it is fresh on people's minds, and people do want to reward people who are doing good work. So I think that's the other thing we learned. I was so worried that as the country shut down, I thought our funding was shut down, but in fact, people really stepped up.
Along those lines, Neal, we talk about innovation, leadership and innovation, the connection. I'm going to do the math. 11 years ago, almost as we do this program right before the 4th of July, you led the effort to create what is now NJPBS. And we've said this so many times, if it were not for that effort, there would be some black hole. I don't know what would be there, Neal. That was innovation. Metro Focus. Every night, check it out on WNET, NJPBS, WLIW. Innovation, constant innovation. At NJ Pack, there's a series going on with NJPBS, art series. Does innovation, not just in your mind, because you often say you're an executive, but you have a producer's mind as well. Does innovating ever stop for you as a leader?
If you stop innovating, you stop succeeding. Everything changes, and it doesn't have to be COVID. People's lives change, their interests change, their demands change, the technology changes. You have to change with all of those. At the end of the day, it really is the voice of the consumer that counts, because they don't care whether you have pre-existing technology demands. They don't care if you thought you were planning something else. All they care is, are you meeting their needs? So unless you're in some field, and I'm not sure where it is, where people's needs will never, ever change, but they do. So you have to innovate to meet them.
Pick it up, Mary.
Yeah, Neal, I would love to know, where did your passion for public television come from? I mean, I know growing up in New Jersey, public television was a go-to, right? Sesame Street and all the other educational and also the arts programming. But where does your passion come from for the public television?
Well, growing up, I too had a lot of good experience with public television. I remember kids programs. I remember arts programs. I remember something like Monty Python that began on public television. So as a teenager, and I remember the first Watergate hearings being on TV, being on on public television. Then I worked for a long time in commercial television. When I got to public media, I realized that, and it's all about the impact you have, and that's what it's about. Sure, we care about the numbers, but the most important thing is how you touch people. And if you don't succeed, you try again.
Getting up at bat. Listen, Neal, I can't help, get up at bat. Neal is not just a very big Yankee fan. He is a Cowboys fan. I don't actually understand that, but that's another story. But by the way, what is I've asked you this before.
I was just going to ask Steve, I was hoping you would what is that? Where does that come from?
He told me, but I tried to forget. Go ahead, Neal, what's the explanation?
I haven't heard it.
So I'm a New Yorker in everything except professional football, because when I was a kid, the New York Giants fans gave me a very hard time. They were very mean to me. And I said, what would really make them crazy would be to root against, support their arch enemy, which were the Cowboys. And they were kind of fun then. That was kind of like Don Meredith, Craig Morton. They were a fun team to watch. Tom Landry was a former Giant, who was the head coach. So I decided, and then as you know, once you form a bond as a kid, it kind of stays. So I've been with them through thick and thin. Hopefully better days to come, but who knows?
Yeah, well, we're not going to talk about the Cowboys any longer, but I do want to, but here's the transition I want to make, Neal, in all seriousness. My mind, when I think about leadership, when I look at sports, to me, managerial decisions, player decisions, how Aaron Judge comports himself, how Derek Jeter comported himself, all those things are part of leadership for me. Do you connect sports to leadership and use those lessons, or to what degree do you, if you do, as the leader in public broadcasting that you are?
Oh, all the time. I mean, I think the things that make leaders successful in sports are things that make anyone successful. Good leaders are people who have ways to communicate with their employees, their teams. They know everybody's not the same. They make some values, some judgments about what's important, and they communicate those well. They're understanding when people don't always hit them, but they're not infinitely patient. They're flexible, because sports changes all the time, and though they have a game plan, it changes if the game itself changes. And then I think there's an evenness to it too, that people are really good at it. And baseball is a great example, right? There are 162 games. If you're really, really good, you're going to win 100 and something of them, right? So you're going to lose 50 or 60 games, even if you're really, really good. And the best players, the Jeters, the Judges, are incredibly even-tempered. Like, they enjoy their success, they accept their failure, they learn from it, and they move on. And I think that having that evenness as a leader is important, because if you rise and fall with every little thing, then people around you are going to react to that too. And we have to recognize we are in it for the long haul. Not everything will be perfect. We deal with the setbacks, we move on, we move forward.
Mary, last question for Neal.
Talk a little bit about grit in leadership.
The people who succeed in life aren't necessarily the smartest, though they're smart. They're not always the most gifted, but they're gifted. The thing they are is that they persevere. They recognize you don't give up. It is the thing about great athletes too, that the best athletes are out, 60% of the time. It is grinding away and making sure that, because I do believe you will get better, right? You'll improve, you'll work harder. And when you have setbacks, and you learn from them and you move on. And if you give up, you'll never succeed.
Neal, we got about a minute left, so I want to take full advantage of this. I'm a big believer that even though you've been in the business for a long time, I've been in the business for a long time, we've been trying to lead as best we can. We'd never stop learning. Where do you say you've made the greatest strides as a leader? Just say in the last few years. We talked about pivoting, COVID, et cetera, but the greatest strides for you as a leader come where?
I think understanding the younger generation, that they expect and want different things. I think, to me, the biggest change has been when I started, the idea was that your personal opinions never mattered, your personal life never mattered. It was about you stay at work, you do your job. What happens outside the office stays outside the office. And what I've realized during COVID, and George Floyd has been a part of it, is that people do expect from their leaders some kind of reinforcement, either acknowledging the feelings they're having, acknowledging
That's right.
you can't just leave all your feelings outside work. And maybe that's because the times now are so tumultuous. The COVID has knocked down the walls between what's work and what isn't. And
That's right.
some of the issues are so emotionally draining. So I think it's as a leader being in touch with that.
As we wrap up, I'm going to say this. One of the themes that we'll explore on lessons in leadership moving forward is vulnerability, leadership and vulnerability. And I won't get on my soapbox, particularly on public broadcasting. That's not my job. I don't do that because that's not what we do. But I will say this. Leaders who believe that confidence means that you act as if you have all the answers. You act as if you're never concerned or fearful. You act as if you got it all together. In my view, that's not leadership. That's something different. You never, I never admit mistakes. Well, not a great quality. That being said, Neal, I want to thank you for joining us on Lessons in Leadership. Our one-on-one audience will see this as well. To you and the team at the WNET Group, all of us and who are connected to, affiliated with public broadcasting, it's an honor to be part of this team. Thank you, Neal.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by the Russell Berry Foundation, New Jersey Sharing Network, Investors Bank, Rowan University, Atlantic Health System, Johnson & Johnson, the Fidelco Group, New Brunswick Development Corporation, and by Summit Health. Promotional support provided by AM 970 The Answer and by New Jersey Monthly.
Hi, I'm Abby. You might see me as an ordinary person, but I've been living with a brain injury since 2018. Opportunity Project gave me hope, and I've gained confidence through job skill training and helping my family. Despite my challenges with memory, I see a possibility to keep improving.
If you have a brain injury, you don't have to face your road to recovery alone. Learn more about Opportunity Project and its partnership with Children's Specialized Hospital.